So the story with music. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad to welcome you to our session. We today are gathering here in order to have discussion of one of the probably most significant topics of today's urbanistic discussion over Moscow. The downtown outside of downtown. The potential of historical megapolis as polycentric structure. As the forerunner speech of the moderator, just for 1 minute, it seems to me that this is actually discussed and quite fairly so, different forms and opportunities for further development and complication of the spatial structure of city of Moscow. This is one of the key points. What managerial decisions on different levels, on the level of the federation, on the level of province, on the level of the city, Moscow city province, and the level of the city government, this process will be stimulated or otherwise transformed. Complication of the structure of the metropolis is very objective tendency. All cities transform into megapolises, starting from 12 to 13 million. We are on the brink of growing of this number, of this potential. And complication is accompanied by the appearance of the alternative city centers, alternative to the historical downtown. In one cities it happens faster, in others not as slow. Moscow and Paris are believed to be more monocentric, more conservative. London and let's say New York are perceived as more dynamic cities where we see the nucleation of many centers. São Paulo, of 20 million people population, is the city of obviously having possession of the polycentrical structure. I'm always concerned with the question how to determine the points of Moscow agglomeration that have potential to grow into these new downtowns. Are those points at all? Do they exist? Can we take, let's say, more or less prepared place and by way of managerial solutions such as designing, investing resources, attracting investors, any place we believe is right, can we transform into the peripheral center? Or it cannot be done? Or maybe we need to have some prerequisites, pre-existing condition. So what are these prerequisites? And how can we determine those prerequisites? What is potential for the development of powerful centers at the periphery in relation to the historical downtown of Moscow agglomeration? How to make people living in the middle urban place of Moscow, who live in the Moscow province, in the regions that are bordering city limits, how they can realize their needs not only in the center of Moscow but in the other centers, let's say in new built center or old existing centers. This question seems to be rather the important question of our session. What is the key potential and how can we evolve it? So I invite to the presentation all the participants. We have determined key speakers, keynote speakers. So I invite Sergei Olegovich Kuznetsov, chief architect of the city, to make first presentation. 10 minutes, Sergei Olegovich. Yes, I'll try to fit. Colleagues, we today, as you know, are making correction of the master plan of the city and the polycentricity, as Alexander Arkadievich said, and appearance of the prerequisites and creation of the new alternative centers within the city is the priority task. As this task we do, we look at the big cities of the world And the experience that is interesting for us, not so much of Europe, but from the countries comparable in terms of economical development and the megapolises of comparable sizes. So we look at the number of the cities and we can say the following. So we can comment that a majority of the cities with monocentric structure, they have history of the urban development, and that there's active change of proportion of the urban and rural population. In the past, people lived in the rural areas and less lived in the cities. Now it's vice versa. Cities experience spontaneous growth, and their basic monocentricity is embedded because centers were built for a long time. They were harmonic. Those were cities of homogeneous structure, homogeneous environment. Now, with the growth of the population, that in the history, the people who used to be a peasant population, they moved to the cities, so they are involved into the monocentric city development. Just based on the Mexico City example, I lived in Mexico about a year ago, or even more than a year ago. This is quite, as of today, in terms of new views. We can maybe look at some other examples, but to me, this example seems to be rather a starting point as the monocentric city that works with different periphery. Situation is very complex, and there are so many peripheries. There's favelas that are similar to Brazilians. In my view, according to our intelligence, it blocks polycentric city. Would be interesting to look at the Mexico City experience because they have potential even more complicated in comparison to Moscow. Would be interesting to compare Moscow. We are in more priority situation rather than other megapolis. São Paulo and Mumbai. São Paulo is the largest megapolis of the South America, more than 20 million population. Really problematic of development of polycentrics, but the people work there and they have examples that we want to look at because it touches us, how they shift the downtown function away from the city center and how they apply the efforts there. Singapore. Also recently we had delegation from Institute of Master Planning. We went to Singapore for a few days and we have Luta Kerr who made master plan of Singapore. We spoke to him. We support main relationship for a long time, and we can say that this is quite good model that again based on the historical center has active population growth. They have alternatives. They physically exist. They develop, and Singapore doesn't suffer transportation problem. The people don't suffer being away from the city center. So we can use their example as our example. So it's polycentric. We can talk for a long time, but not as part of this presentation. They separate zones, industrial zones for complex production zones. So this is achievable. This is doable task. Very interesting example of Tokyo. One of the most interesting examples. Tokyo, if you slightly look at the southwest, it reminds Moscow in terms of the density of roads, more of white. You can say that they also have adjacent territory in Tokyo. And 2,000 kilometers is just like in Moscow, have a attached piece of land. If you look at the problematic the Tokyo suffered 20, 30 years ago, we see that the problems they experience is the problems we solve now. Also with the colleagues from Tokyo, we spoke yesterday. This is monocentrism, is industrial zones. This is the lack of the links between these zones. Everyone knows from the school years when we saw the TV pictures with the policemen in the gas masks. This year we went to Tokyo in spring. We see the big change in the city of Tokyo. They bet on polycentrism. They negotiate with the corporation so that the corporations move the headquarters away from the downtown So they find places that potentially are good for transportation that are not developed yet. So they build the anchors around which they build functions, which seems to be good opportunity for Moscow. So we can discuss with the colleagues. Istanbul, the nearest to Moscow, big megapolis, also with clearly expressed downtown. We wanted to use this example. Berlin, it's another situation when the center is created. It's like city with the void in the middle. But Istanbul is closer to Moscow. Recently they had big riots. It's about the development of the downtown. We know that the downtown is overcrowded, overpopulated. Just like in Tokyo, the situation is different. Istanbul is the example that has tendency that will be solved simultaneously with Moscow. Shanghai, Chinese agglomeration is also a very interesting example. Looks like my time is out. Shanghai and Beijing. Shanghai, actively develops new Pudong district, quickly evolving urban development, and Beijing is very interesting. We spoke with the delegation from Beijing because the tradition of the Soviet planning in Beijing are clearly seen. Even just looking at this scheme, you see the rings that are closer to the rectangles, but the concentric system of planning that came from the Soviet city building system exists in China, and the colleagues work with this problematic. You can say that in Beijing you see the polycentric tendencies. That is also a very interesting example that we want to actively incorporate in our practice in Moscow. And two words about Moscow. Unquestionably, the question of new points of growth, where we have the prerequisites for growth, this is where we start. So we're saying that there are points where you can have public and business and transport accessibility, and maybe well established, just like with Rublevo-Arkhangelsk, in principle is declared by Sberbank. There is international bidding organized. And Molzhaninovsky region, they have good railroad link with St. Petersburg, so the accessibility is good. It's also Skolkovo and Kommunarka and Mosrengen. These are places with prerequisites with accessibility by transport, because it's also adjacent territories and ready built clusters of the jobs that can be developed further. Also very important story of the touristic recreation zone, because we need place not only for work but also places for recreation. Those rings are oftentimes around Moscow River. We actively launch in the next year. We will be developing new plans, and we will study the potential of the added territory. So those prerequisites from the natural, from the preserves, these territories can develop as alternative development of the industrial zones. It is clear the relationship with the ownership. The blue circles are around the borders of Southeast. This for us is the focus number one, working with the industrial zones, because today this is like a traffic jam between southeast, southeast and the city center, and penetration, these pieces of industrial zones. But as for Posilova, the work was published and the territory will be developed. Next focus of our attention is Serpemolot and Southport. We try to develop this sector of the city. It expands the central function, so it will provide more permeability of the center in comparison to the west and northwest. And logistical planning, it is clear that huge megapolis is tightly connected to the cargo turnover and freight traffic turnover and influence of the railway. Also, it's being actively considered. The prerequisites can be existing railway network that provides the delivery of the cargoes into the territory of Moscow hub. Thank you. Especially thank you very much that you were able to fit into the time frame despite of the complexity of the message. All right, let's continue. Andrew, please.
It's a delight to be here in Moscow and have the opportunity of sharing some of the experiences that we have had in developing the regeneration of London. Very different cities and with different political and developmental histories. But many of the issues are common to cities worldwide. It's something that we've been looking at in many cities, and we've been working in Rio de Janeiro and in Bucharest recently as well. Very different cities to Moscow, but again, some of the themes start coming through. One of the challenges here was about setting up one of the discussion points on this agenda was to talk about competing centres. In the city, my argument would be that this is a series of complementary centres that have different functions to the historic city centre, that have special roles and help to distribute both movement flows to rebalance the land economics of the city and also help the social structure. Part of this is about people's understanding and feeling that a commuting time, a daily movement time of around 1 hour, of 60 minutes, is a comfortable distance to move to and from work each day, to and from their leisure and cultural activities. When you start getting people needing to travel more than that, then there are stresses in the urban social fabric. So if we look at how cities have evolved based on that 1 hour travel time, the walking city turns into the horse-based city, turns into the tram and bus city, and the city itself gets more complex, and we have the ability to travel further in that time. The real transformation is when the railways come, and then the automobile, which enables us real freedom to move left to right, north, south, east, west, to make our choice. And that's when the city starts to become a little less controlled, and we get some of the complexities that Moscow is seeing as everybody focuses on the central business district, on the historic downtown. Now, part of that commuting, that 1 hour network, we also then start introducing high-speed rail and air travel. That is another perspective and thinks about international and national connectivity, but that's not really the focus of today. The pressure on the downtown and that 1 hour commute then pushes people out to the dormitory settlements, and they start to grow. But I think we've seen the world over, and the issues around in Moscow as well, that those surrounding areas, they also grow and their economies thrive as people from the city move outwards. But what happens is that the inner area outside the central business district, outside the historic core, tends to die away, and the economy really struggles, and we have vacant land, and the land economics changes. And we're seeing that in Moscow, and some of the material I was reading before I came here, with an average of 67-minute commute, more out commuting, 40% of jobs in the city centre, but only 9% of the population. The cancelling of commercial floor space contracts, the shift in the economy to a service economy rather than a manufacturing economy, and then looking at the housing areas, the micro-areas and the improvement programme and the change programme in that peripheral area also needed. So the city tomorrow in New Moscow is exacerbating that issue and making that outflow. So my argument would be that this is a strong policy from the city, but this should be accompanied by a reflection on the opportunities to create new centres and polycentric centres within the city, as well as looking outside to New Moscow. And it was good to hear Sergei's description of all the initiatives that are sitting there in the city as a whole. A couple of years ago at the Urban Forum, the ULI presented some work that they've been doing, and I know that people in this room will have been involved in that. When identifying 15,000 hectares of industrial land within the city itself that had opportunity for redevelopment. And a number of initiatives are obviously coming forward with passenger services on the rail network, and other initiatives to bring these sites forward. The opportunity here is to complement the development of the city with and really think ambitiously about the opportunities for these sites in creating a compact polycentric city as well. And we get an urban structure that looks a little more like this, with flows not going just into the city and not just out of the city, but people moving in both directions, using the urban infrastructure and not having rush hour flows in one direction that are difficult. Now, some of the experiences of bringing forward industrial land mean that they can be mixed use areas with employment, focusing on the knowledge economy and how. And the shift in high-value jobs away from manufacturing jobs, putting leisure, sport and cultural activities in the places where many people in Moscow can access them. New formats and choice in retail that are in areas that are very well connected through the public transport system. Education, using the vibrancy of student life and student activity to add life to the centre. And also living opportunities, not only new homes in the city, but also looking at how these areas can spread to help the regeneration and improvement of existing housing districts. So now, turning to London and the comparisons there, many of you will have heard Edward Lister in the last few days talking about the experiences of London. So and the challenges that city has. I'll not repeat all of those, but there is 14% growth in population in the next decade. That in the next 20 years, another 1.6 million jobs need to be created in the city. And this is a growth of 30%. So there are big challenges in London as well, from a situation in London where it's a very different stage in its development. The issues of urban sprawl and growth were challenged in London in the late 1940s when a green ring was put around the city. And this is a policy structure called the Green Belt, which prevents urban development extending out across the city. And the width from east to west of the built-up area is about 50 kilometres east to west and about 40 kilometres north to south. So that gives you some comparison of scale. And this within the city, within that green belt of areas, identified a number of industrial sites, old transport interchanges that are not used, and land that is underused in the city, for the very purpose of spreading away from the city centres of Westminster and the West End and the financial centre of London. Now, early in the 1980s, this created the Canary Wharf development and the Docklands redevelopment in one of these areas. And over the last decade, the railway station terminuses coming into London are progressively being redeveloped as high-density urban hubs that have offices, living, and cultural institutions all based around them. And the transport infrastructure here, with the two rings of transit that now work, and the key interregional rail services that have been introduced, as you can see, link up many of these blue areas, the areas of opportunity that have been identified in city planning. High-speed rail is now coming into London that connects the north of the United Kingdom with the city, and again the opportunities are around the connections in that and future plans as well. Now, if we blow up the city and focus in on the centre, I'm going to look at just 4 examples of how London is changing. Croydon is a town centre to the south of the city, very much built out in the 1960s. Poor public realm, poor economy, but it has very strong public transport connections back into the city centre and also to London Gatwick Airport. That has been maximised with a local municipality-led investment programme as attracting new development and the creation of a new city centre within the city. This is London's third city centre. The key driver here was a clear vision by the local municipality, the borough of Croydon, to bring this forward. The second opportunity is Old Oak Common, and this is an old transit interchange, but it's the gateway to Heathrow Airport, and it's the last connecting point on the new high-speed rail proposals that come into London, and is extremely well connected both nationally and internationally. But the important thing here is the jobs and the knowledge economy job creation that has the potential of using this land for new employment. Heathrow Airport on the left diagram here shows the amount of knowledge-intensive industry that is created around Heathrow. The right-hand diagram shows the level of deprivation and social problems in the area around Old Oak Common. The blue areas are areas of more deprivation. The green areas are more areas of prosperity. So we have an areas of social issue, land vacancy, and opportunity. Connect the airport with the city centre, and here's a point straight in the middle where we can maximise development opportunity for the city. And these are the connections that directly from Old Oak Common on the rail network. And if you just change once, they're the connections that are available across London. So thinking laterally, thinking differently about an old rail site and the connections to the city has made this the prime new development opportunity in the City of London. And this is some work that AECOM did for the municipality, looking at the potential for Old Oak Common as a mixed-use centre based on corporate, high-tech and knowledge economy employment around the waterfront setting. The third example, the Royal Docks. 100,000 jobs were lost in the Royal Docks when they closed in the 1970s and 1980s, and there have been progressive attempts to bring this industrial land back into use. This is about 6 or 7 kilometres from the city centre of London, and you can see the commercial centre of the city in the distance there. Now, setting up a development corporation, a special governance body to control the development and bring forward the development of this area was introduced. That put in new transport connections and also cleaned up the very badly polluted land so that it was good for new development. And the recent initiatives working with the Mayor of London and the local municipality have brought together all of their land assets and their energies to bring new investment here, including fiscal incentives of a mechanism called an enterprise zone, where it has simplified planning and infrastructure. It has business rate discounts and capital allowances for equipment for occupiers going in across this area. And a lot of hard work by the Mayor's office to bring new international investment into London. And this will be the new Asian business port, the investment by ABP China at Royal Albert Dock, right adjacent to the London City Airport as well. So a very well connected area where the municipality and the Mayor have worked very closely to bring the site forward. The last example, and I'll just be 2 minutes if that's okay, is looking at the Olympic Park in Stratford, London. And now this is an area of old industrial land again, a lot of vacancy, contamination, but beautiful waterways, but very well connected part of the city again. A part where crime and health were a problem, so there are social issues to deal with, and very well connected into the London transport network, and only 4 kilometres from the very heart of the City of London. This used the catalyst of winning the Olympic Games to transform this area and bring all of the different stakeholders and different public utilities and public bodies together into one place, with a major new town centre with retail, leisure, commercial and cultural activities, based also on the sporting legacy of the London Olympics, based around new park and public environment being very important there. Not only is the physical development here important, but it's the arts and cultural development and the sporting activities that are being promoted in the site to bring forward this derelict area to a beautiful part of London where parkland and new homes and new jobs are absolutely focused on this new metropolitan centre within the city. And that cultural aspect, both for music and concerts and art and culture and sport coming together, creates a very special new ambition in the city, using 20 years of regeneration to bring that forward. So there are some stories of London and the issues there. I think focusing on areas that are very well connected already, using governance techniques and tax breaks and fiscal incentives to attract people in, a very clear vision by the local municipalities and London government about what they want to achieve in each area, focusing on the new economy, focusing on bringing new activity and new uses that are not found elsewhere in the city onto these industrial sites that are so accessible to the majority of the population, and then sticking with it because regeneration of these new polycentric nodes in the city it takes a long time. It's very complicated, but very good.
Thank you for a very substantive presentation. I don't have the presentation, but I'd like to call for you to be careful regarding polycentric Moscow, because polycentric is not panacea, but extreme case of is Los Angeles. We had practice of students last year. They had their own urban school, which is called École Noire, because main slogan of them is the following: Los Angeles is the future of all super cities of the cities. And this future is horrible because the city is segregated to parts and lost a feeling of the city. Of course, radial rain system of Moscow is conflicting this idea fully, but I'd like to mention that it was developed naturally, and so Professor Gorky said that what is Silicon Valley is different from Silicon Breast, and Silicon Earth is natural, and Silicon in Moscow is natural development. There are some positive externalities there, and disruptions of this system will bring to disappearing these externalities. So before we start liquidation or demolition, need to think whether we make this exacerbate this, and it is based on a number of myths. First of all, it is the feeling that is in many presentations that Moscow is the center, and center is the jobs, and others are residential, like sleeping areas. It's not so, but look at the presentation of Thomson Reuters that open our eyes to many things, and is going against those many a few, not so much people come to work to the center, and 70% of Muscovites, and this is data based on the vision of the company, of Megaphone company. According to anonymous data on mobile phones, 70% of Muscovites from 6 a.m. to 12 to noon goes not more than 1 square kilometer. So you can't imagine that everybody is rushing to work to the center of Moscow. It's a myth. And second myth is too much emphasis on industrial jobs, which likes to be located centrally. There are many functions and jobs that are close to population. In American urban sites, there's so-called educational and medical facilities. So this is where main jobs and should be in a modern industrial city, and see the lists of employers in the U.S. cities. So hospitals are at the head of list, and there are thousands, 10, 15,000, and it's normal things for hospitals of this industrial enterprises no longer exist. So of course this part of employment is as Max Perov mentioned at Thomson Reuters statistics, main part of movements that they fix, as including movement of school children. They just move around their own quarters, and that's why third myth, that imagination, that main problem of Moscow is movement just purely job related. But we need to think about the general movement around Moscow. Yes, in the morning where you fix mostly job related traffic, but in the evening from 7 to possibly, and which is not done, if Moscow is migrate around the city, like looking for recreation, this would be great. And then the city will be with just feeling the city at a large distance. And anyway, the RKS is not the main reason of problems, transportation problems in Moscow. Of course, it would be better to deal with improving these systems with such recipes as HORT, development of capillary city networks of streets, and also more subway stations, something like that. But when we listen to Moscow city government, and looks like they all aware of all this, and they agree to that, and it's not possible to argue with them. As was yesterday, he was said that, like, we have been thinking for a year and a half about Northeast Corner, but the activity of city government, it doesn't say that they are sticking to these declarations that they voice here, and me as a university person can tell it openly. And whatever the other way around, that you see that instead of development of a capillary street network, there is idea that no traffic light freeways and making streets into transportation like routes, and without crossing this by a capillary system. So that's the other way. We don't see any attributes of metro stations being more dense. In Paris, you can see from one station another one, and each citizen lives in the central part and 5 minutes walking distance from subway. I live in the Kurskaya, behind Sadovaya Ring, and due to one stop, and I'm at next to Kremlin, crossing the Sadovaya and Bolva Ring, and nothing similar in Moscow is planned. So it seems to me we need to somehow push Moscow government to make the declarations good. And when we had a new mayor, and would be problems in Moscow, because in Lushkov time many record zones that were planned for future HORT were all built up, and now, based on what colleague Blinken likes to say, in Moscow streets and parking on 9, 8, 10% of territory of the city, although on average European, 25 in American, 35. So there's still at the same place. In conclusion, I'd like to say that the concept of center-periphery, which is prevailing here in classical plan, has another semi-periphery, so intermediate zone, not just as a zone like between center and as a special zone, it's between Sadovaya Ring and the third ring. And I live in this zone, and I know it very well. And for this zone, there is should be special strategy, and different from peripheral, and is interpreted center as too much up to third Rhine. For Moscow is strange. Center, as in my youth, was finished with Bulvar Rhine, and now is a feeling as within Sadova Rhine and Garden Rhine, and say that we are not known Moscow. Me as an Americanist is I'm surprised about the Manhattan that we're dealing with on the central part of New York. In each quarter, statistics on internet, like how many cafes there, and like small plants, 125. Nothing similar is known about Moscow by urban planners. Based on this information, though, decisions are made, and also it's not clear the opinion of Moscow. As in any Western city, you can find like a map with like these different districts where each citizen's called that they know that they live in Tribeca, Chelsea, etc. In Moscow, this work was not done, and knowledge about Moscow is very low. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Speakers are sticking to close different points of view, which shows that there is a place for discussion, and I think it will be fruitful now. We used half of the time for the section, and I would like in the beginning we have declared participants of have another speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. We have another speaker. Excellent. Nikolai Kazansky. So, your message, another 10 minutes. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks for... As we have democracy here. As usual in Moscow, and we heard a lot about international experience from Sergei and Andrew, and I would like to continue what Leonid and say about Moscow. It's called investment in periphery, actually. It's periphery and semi-periphery, which is called how Moscow moves from Kremlin to outskirts. And to see in the future, we need to look in the past and how Moscow developed, and what Leonid said. And starting from the 60s on Third Rhine to Outer Rhine, then we went out of step away from and catalyzed development in the 90s with updating the Outer Rhine, then creating Third Rhine. Like everywhere in the world, to develop real estate infrastructure needs to be developed, and the city was a locomotive here. So today in all sectors we have explosive growth. However, we speak a lot about new Moscow, and sometimes we forget about huge potential within the Moscow Outer Rhine. And today we have in industrial zones almost 90,000 hectares, and then the city determined that 4,000 hectares are up to be reorganized. So with average build-up area 25,000 per hectare. With this number, it's 100 million meters. So today, I remind, we have 220 meters of housing in Moscow, according to official statistics, and talking about office space is about 15 million in high class and about 25 million low class. Warehouses about 10 million and Moscow agglomeration. And then a modern retail centers about 4 million meters. So basically we are saying that even within these industrial zones that are officially subject to reorganization, or at least there is a trend, we have about 40% out of what was built totally in Moscow, and overall, about all industrial zones, that's slightly more. That's the same amount of real estate within outer ring, and it's not necessarily should bring increase of population, because we still have endowment with housing is 20 meters, although in Western Europe it's 40 meters, and in United States more than 60. We have endowment with retail in Moscow is lower, also 2 times them comparable costs in cities and countries. So if we're going to rent it out, at the same time can increase retail real estate 2 times. For warehouses, same situation. We can develop real estate without increasing like quantity, and Moscow grows in population and points of growth. Most industrial zones already specified by colleagues, and part of them are with developers, and PSN Group company, Donstro Invest will say more probably, because there's state and private companies partners.
And of course, when you look at the development and redevelopment of existing zones, you have to look at the Western experience and understand that if that territory of 50, 100 more hectares, rather this is the place for 20, 30 and more years. It's not process for 5 years, like we used to have 5 years period of development. For New Moscow, you see new potential of growth, and Moscow is growing. I don't want to make it into Los Angeles, of which we spoke, but we want to offload Moscow within the Beltway area. Famous zones of development, mostly in the western part, and International Financial Center and Skolkovo, of course. Such infrastructure is what the business is trying to follow. If you talk about Moscow business, you should develop housing, and you have to have place where you work near the place where you live. And statistics says that people don't want to travel far, and they want to do everything, and they want to have shopping. They'd like to have schools and universities nearby to the places where they live. And here are the statistics about different districts. If you look at in general, then we have the area of the warehouse, retail, housing, according to the existing plans. And as of today, if we go back to the numbers, that we have about 100 million meters only at the territories of Moscow that under redevelopment, then commissioning of about 3 million meters per annum. That means out of this 100 will half go for housing. It happens that we have 20, 50 years of time frame. Most actively developing cities in the near vicinity, such as Krasnogorsk. And colleagues, I would like to note that what I spoke, many cities went through not just growth, but the redevelopment of such territories, such as what Andrew said, and the Canary Wharf. Not always these were commercially successful projects. Sometimes developers entered and then they had to go bankrupt. So that's important to find very thin divider line when the city has to give guarantee and developers should assume certain risks, but it must be not playing football with one gate. So we don't want to impose all risks on one developer. We want to share the risks between the business and the state. There's no ideal scheme. No one was able to solve the problem, so gathering together we can solve the problem. So colleagues, I would like to express my thanks for attention, and once again note that this private-public partnership, first of all in infrastructure, and when you have infrastructure, the market will follow. We developers and all participants of the market will go there, and the city develops at the places where the fertile ground is prepared. Thank you. Very content-rich presentation. Now let's move to discussion. We have declared members of discussion. Alexander Kollontai, please. Please, let's change the time frame. Time is pressing. Just 5 minutes per each. But you can't help it. As you say, dear moderator, I'm sorry. The topic as polycentricity was mentioned at the forum, to me, is number one, honestly. And I will understand it more broader. Second, very good that we went through polycentricity topics and we broadly interpret it, but not sufficiently. However, Moscow, I would say, is deemed to be polycentric. If you want to get out of the transport collapse and very low quality of environment, especially in periphery, Moscow, I'll repeat, is deemed and sentenced to polycentricity. Let's take care of the concept. I will not tell you how to build Moscow as the polycentric place, but let's get to the bottom of the idea of the polycentricity. Traditionally, I think majority interpret it as the urban structure in the physical sense. It's what we were taught at schools. You can see it at the schemes and any analysis of the cities. It's about quality. I'd like to say that polycentricity is the global quality of survival of everything. Biological diversity is based on polycentricity, and it's also economical structure, and its expression in the market is polycentric. Socio-cultural component is multivalent, polyvalency of the culture and the survival of human being and the nation, and at the end, political component. With democratic organization of the society is the important element. Will be polycentricity. If we want to yield effect from polycentricity, we need to have effect from all of this. If you narrow down to redevelopment and to use just new territory, it will not have effect. Even with have respect to different experiences, it takes care, like Canary Wharf and other things that may be good examples of polycentricity because it's the city. The only way to confirm that we created polycentricity is to create a center within a zone of influence. It's not just the piece that was tossed away. It doesn't have its coverage zone because it's cut by the environment barriers. It badly connected to the city center. Now the question of the moderator, what are the key properties of polycentricity and the center? To me, it's three major concepts where you can identify presence or formation of the center. The first is the functional content. Its potential of the place is diversity of functions that are concentrated in one place. This diversity must be maximum in relation to its surrounding. If we discover such place, it is predisposed to this quality. Second is connectivity. This point should be in the best way connected to the adherent territories, so they have right for life. You have state policy, you can create it. It costs gigantic money, so you have to select whether we discover the most connected places and saturate them. And the third quality of the center is ability to develop. If we don't create internal transformation and external development included into the center, it may die. Although Paris, London, historically starting from 60s after the war, created polycentric agglomerations, the influence of the city center is gigantic. The France in Paris, Canary Wharf, Nispas in last didn't save. London is filled with the office centers, the pressure of the business, gigantic capital that is formed in these centers and turn them into global cities. They live according to the world economics. This component is very important for the understanding of not very simple concept of the center. It's the concept of the social, political status, the prestige concept. Historical center is prestigious. The capital goes there because it declares its position in relation to the world, because it selects the valuated place, the relation between horizontals of culture and the vertical, such as the management. Polycentric cannot be created without organization. The basis is self-organization of the society that we unfortunately have. If you can connect these two components, if you have this model that in the contest in agglomeration was demonstrated on Ostozhenka, that detected different expressions of Moscow but could go away because it was outside of our methodology as the system of organization. But joiner of the places, uniqueness of the place, social uniqueness of the place, and organization of the structure of the city, of polycentric structure. These are two things that will work out and will allow to live within the whole, to have the pieces. Otherwise, the city will fall apart and we will have not polycentric but simple multifunctionality. Don't confuse polycentricity. It's powerful new quality of the city and separated from... Thank you. Very good view on things. Mikhail, please. 5 minutes. Good afternoon. In 5 minutes cannot tell you too much, so I will not tell you everything we do, but rather I will try to reflect what I heard today. First of all, for me this forum is, I believe, I organized many forums and participated in many forums. I think this forum has very interesting discussion. This is the third forum for me. I found many things, and we started first urbanistic forum from the foreigners who conducted research, and they said, let's talk about polycentricity. And we talk about this not in the format, do we need it or not? But now we start from the question what to do to the question how to do it. And we drill deep into how to do it. And so Leonid is probably fair with certain things that Leonid says, I agree. With certain things, I'm not a big expert in urbanistics, but I still have questions. I still believe that this city may go to polycentrism. More important question is to understand how to make it, to make those additional centers so they be harmonized with the historical center, so that they create real quality of life and not form additional copycat of Los Angeles. What I do, what our department does, we, just like many in the city, are responsible for industrial territories, and we have a discussion who is more important. And finally, we come to the point, how, let's do it together. Let's try to work on the projects. We have 209 industrial zones, and they say, let's reorganize these industrial zones. Nikolai was saying, if you start reorganize the industrial zones, my proposal was rather what we promote, let's look at some territories, because the models of development can be different. And Andrei Sharonov, when he was vice mayor, he drove the project of art quota. It was interesting initiative where we add value to the first point of growth. As the Vinzavod art play, this is big territory with several hectares of territory. It was bottom up. How to make it at those points of growth, we add quality. And what we do, and actively shown in this forum, like in the Southport, and what we do together with the chief architects and most architectural institute and other colleagues, we try to realize it. I think successfulness of the project will show how mature we are, how we can make comprehensive development of the territories. And this is 1,000 hectares of the project. That's this This one territory near Volgogradsky, Lublinsky and Moscow River. The key statement that we're trying to fix. They talk about housing. Housing is consumed by Moscow very fast. KPZU is, it's all bought. We have so much oil revenue and they buy it. So regular laymen believe the housing is investment, so housing is bought immediately. But we're talking about different thing. We can try to plan and tune kilometers, cubic meters of housing and retail. The question, what will be inside? What will be inside? So we have projects like I entered the territory of ZIL from the previous century. Industrial buildings empty. Who's going to go there? If ZIL territory would develop, if they were comfortable to get there, if it was pleasant to look through the window, people could go there. So what we're trying to offer, for 2 years we worked on to transform a bankrupted plant in 2008, stopped, AECOM Moskvich stopped existence to change a small piece of land, 28 hectares, to change quality of environment. We modernized the buildings, 350,000 square meters. We started rebuilding and we changed the quality of production. We today try to show the city, not only the colleagues from the government, but first of all to the residents and businessmen, owners of industrial territories. See, industry can be different from the industry. Industry, just like it is in Europe or America or in many Asian cities, is formed as technological. I'm finishing. It's ecological, or the projects where we start and launch. Residents come back that in 2000 went to Germany, France, America, to Asia, Korea, Japan, and so on. They come back with their projects. This is different quality of environment, and they start to form. We understand by the end of 15th area, 30 hectares will be filled with thousands of jobs. These people will want different subway, tekstilshiki. They don't want to walk through Shanghai. That is between the workplace and subway. They want kindergartners, they want schools, they want to go to the theater, they want to live 15-20 minutes away. That's why the cheapest, one of the cheapest territories of the land after 10-15 years may gain new quality level in terms of living and the cost. But we'll have to make serious decisions. If you look at the presentation, such as Kolomensky zone, with the cords, we don't argue. We need to build cords. But when we have additional concept for additional radial highways, the city exists the way it is, and it will not become polycentric. It will take 10 to 15 years. But cutting by highways the tissue of the city and isolate and segregate territories, it's the big question. Maybe we can go under the ground. Maybe we will create points of attraction. We'll have to answer these questions and a number of the other questions. Thank you very much. I think it's not a question. It's clear we shouldn't cut the living tissue of the city. Ilya, your commentary, please, for 5 minutes. Thank you. I want to say that these centers of the city already exist, and really you have to see them and develop. I'll allow myself to use illustrative materials that was shown in addition to what Sergei Olegovich was saying. Perhaps I will say the following. Perhaps you saw that in Singapore. The new districts around woodland or lake. This is very important because around this people can live. They already live there. These are historical framework of the cities. And with appropriate development, there can be the centers that can be and must be developed. Plus, to this historical carcass, we need to add other carcass. We need transportation hubs. Like when we looked at Tokyo slide, these are also the places where around which people live, reside, and they can these places can develop in the full-blown districts. What is absolutely necessary to consider is the agglomeration transportation framework. It must go through entire territory and with consideration of the Moscow province. In that case, it will be clear that all these, it will be clear how to develop those industrial zones and how to work with these territories. It's absolutely necessary to create the network of expresses, that is the city transit rapid system that would unite all these districts that already exist between themselves. And this is what was mentioned by Andrew in his presentation, that evolution of the city is dependent on the public transport. If we want to develop polycentric territories, and we must develop polycentric territories such as Moscow agglomeration, within the boundaries of the first concrete road beltway, we need to develop strategy like strategic rail development for Moscow province, so all the territories could function sufficiently full scale.
And another thing that I wanted to say, that really this disconnection of territory, that the worst that can happen, and those decisions that is going to be made in the general plan and for development for the next 20, 30 years should include creation of sustainable conditions for development in the future. I mean, not now, but in the future. And therefore, these territories, as or Khimki, whatever, or Leninsky Prospect, or Izmailsky Park, is that should be around, like in Manhattan or in Swiss Lakes. We have these potentials, and as Khimki Hovrina region, Mnevniki, Strogino. And when we consider transportation carcass, it should be integrated. And my proposal is to integrate it into this agglomeration fabric of the city. Otherwise, we'll have to extend those streets that are important part of historical city. And integration of this carcass should be done at the expense of these industrial zones, and it shouldn't be necessarily like highways. Well, that's a different topic. Yeah, it's a different, but it allows to develop and not to destroy. And I'm about to finish. Not to destroy existing territories that potential of polycentric development of Moscow. This is without condition. Yeah, I'd like to give the floor. Please, Maxim, to save time, I'll present myself because I want some time for a dialogue with the audience. And briefly, I'll try to say we have a development company, and there's 20 hectares space in one of the industrial zones that we discussed, 140 hectares zone, and I play two roles. On the one hand, we develop the urban planning territory, and it's clear how to do it, and we do it. And what Sergei said about neighbors is a big problem, because on the other side, in the middle of this year, Mayor proposed major investors to participate in the discussion with the city about different topics, and one of the topics is revitalization of industrial zones. And we started this dialogue, and we were offered for each investor to take upon ourselves one of the pilot zones, and we started working with Grivoronova zone, and the owners of a big problem, owners that want to participate in revitalization, and there are some owners that don't need anything. They have some warehouse which is inefficiently used, and they don't need anything. There is federal property, federal land, where Moscow authorities cannot influence at all. So, in practical terms, it seems to us that one of the tools to influence a city, so the city should have the right somehow influence the owners or land lease, and so that they do something or sell out. And so the city doesn't have these instruments. One of the instruments could be the cadastral value of land, because it's different for different use. If the city determines the type of permit, the like trade or office, by this type of use, you can reduce the specific value and motivating this activity. In other types of permitted use, increases. So that's one of the instruments how it can be implemented. But on a global scale, we understand that we need a federal law that would provide Moscow and the city the rights to influence all the industrial zone and all the owners, both Moscow and federal. So that's one of the problems. Thank you for this excellent another point of view. And this terminal, that type of permitted use, is even pleasant to say, because in Moscow we just plan to have this terminology and to become a real practice of management. So very good. We went over the agenda. Now we have 10 minutes to listen to some offers and proposals and from the audience. So please raise your hand. And just 1-2 minutes. 1-2 messages. So those who are willing to say, please introduce yourself. 1.5 minutes. I'll stop you. Sergei Nikolai, Lab of Helio Architecture. The city is different from other cities. And if we're talking about Los Angeles, is one thing. If we're talking about Singapore, is different. Totally. London is not related not to LA or Singapore. The city as the city fabric, as a city development is. If we want to influence Moscow development, we need to decide which city fabric should be there and in which direction to develop. One of the theses for Moscow development is a total planning, quarter planning. That's, I think, it's a step back. And the quarter planning is not quarter development, and we cannot reach quarter planning and density as in Singapore. So we're gonna sprawl. So it's important to develop green territories and increase concentration of city spaces, different, and come to the city in the space. So if you come to new typology of architecture, this would give us different opportunities to form the city environment. Thank you. You are the next. Good afternoon. Edward Trutny, Institute of Economics of the city. Excellent session. The thoughts are the following. It's been discussed a lot important things, except the tools and instrument and for motivation. All speeches are representative. About the last one, Maxim's, he tells such words, but he doesn't bring it to complete. But legal zoning, what is the instrument? And federal law, ask a federal law which has been existing 20 years but not used. Now, Andrew Jones, excellent presentation that tells about centers are not made, but they are grown. They are grown, well, creating legal conditions and economic incentives. And these incentives, here are the instruments to grow. And excellent phrase of Alexander, and from some moment that we work with territories, we go beyond our methodologies. In this point, I'm just stopping. So how come it's not possible? So we need to expand our methodologies, and with these instruments that are not discussed, legal zoning, economic motivation, incentives, we cannot just engage to resolve our problems with other people and third parties. And very interesting Sergei's presentation, but in the background was that, guys, let's do it in the center. But how to do this instrument of growing? Also important thing, I'd like to ask, how are we going, if there are no objections about growing center, how are we going to develop center at New Moscow if a new federal law was prepared for the New Moscow and actually removes all these tools, instruments, like legal zoning, and that's a number of interesting stories. Okay, thank you. Very valuable. Please introduce Marie. Of a mind system, systematic analysis, modeling. I'd like to protect centers. Well, there are two of you here already. I support Professor. So any viable system should have a center. I think the English participants of discussion, they know what a Stafford Beer that in the 60s developed the model of viable system model, which also has strong center. And the polycentrism, any viable system, creates subsystems, because it's a way of absorption of complexities. But all the subsystems are partially autonomous, because they are always connected to the strong center. Otherwise, we have problem of Los Angeles. There should be identification of strong center of Moscow. Moscow should have a heart. Thank you. Thank you for the heart. Mr. Antonov. Yesterday, one of the discussions was a very good phrase that in Moscow it is comfortable only for the money. So this discussion supports this. Polycentrism is considered in terms of investment. We have places where the money will flow and be redeveloped and build something new. Moscow has sub-centers, and nobody mentioned about Luzhniki and Hollow Springs and Vedinha. These are sub-centers for people. Let's develop them. Right? I will be very brief. And it seems to me that in all speeches, they didn't disclose the name of what is said as the potential of Moscow as polycentric metropolis, megacity. We always speak about Moscow as a city. It seems to me if we go beyond the boundaries of the city and consider territory overall, and megacity is something more than Moscow, maybe Moscow wins if independent centers are developed around Moscow, and interaction of Moscow with some independent centers beyond the city. That's one of the potential ways to develop the city, because Moscow should not include in its area and bring all the centers in its territory. Maybe new centers should evolve beyond the boundaries of the cities. Thank you. Excellent. To remind us that interaction of problem of connection of Moscow and Moscow region, and in terms of planning and social planning, still not finally resolved and not complete, and it's a topic for future discussions. So, colleagues, you can ask questions to the speakers. It is also possible. That way we somehow move the issues and promote the question to Mr. Kuznetsov. Are you working with a system methodologist, systematic? One planning and urban planning, and yeah. It's more to Alexander because this construction general plan, they use all these methodologies. We are not isolated, and definitely it's a rhetoric question. Like cybernetics, do you use this? Yes. So, yeah, why not? It's a good experiment. And so there was a suggestion. There are not just two alternative points of view. So for those who don't know, again, there are two extreme points of view, and I exacerbate this situation, though in life there are no extreme. First, that the current development as of today and further should go in terms of intensification of managerial resources and development of peripheral centers, like centers on the periphery of Moscow or outside of Moscow. But like intensive investment over there and creating centers of, and the other extreme point of view, saying that was voiced here today, that this is like for the future, or either it's not needed or not realistic or not feasible, but in any case, it's more efficient to continue develop already developed central core and developing like with roots and all the rest as like supporting development. So between these extreme points, there are different layers and like connection of central core of the city and periphery, but today we're not going to touch upon. So these 2 points of view on polycentric or monocentric. Well, can you add a third option for the people who are not satisfied with the quality of analysis of the problem and consider that they don't have the basis for conclusion in one or another direction, that consider that the level of analysis of these problems is sufficient? Okay, please provide this. By the way, stand up and I can speak about hypothesis for many people present in this hall. It could seem that the level of studies, of analysis of these problems is such that there is no basis to make one or another like straightforward conclusion. So I assume that the number of people who will vote for the third option could be the majority of present.
Absolutely justified and well-founded points of view, and not only I share this point of view with some reservation. Shall we vote? Let's vote, let's try. So first variant, polycentric. Make concrete. No commentary. I'm interested. Let's try to vote. Now, no, will polycentric model in the near future. Raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. Who sees long-term and near-time and long-term polycentric city with development of one center? Minority. 6, 7, 8, 10. Overwhelming minority. And now, the third variant, we are in the state of certain uncertainty because of the lack of information and lack of research work, so that we can make summary in favor of one or another position. Who is in favor? So I'd like to say that the first and the last point of view are dominating in comparison to the second point of view. That doesn't take care of, doesn't refuse. So I can make results, but we still have opportunity to listen to at least opinions from the audience, please, audience members. Vladimir Viktorovich. Please come closer. So, Vladimir Klimanov, Academy of National Economy. I have two considerations. We still talk about attempt to make polycentricity under condition of the center attraction condition. For Moscow, it obviously will be an influential trend that in some way should be counteracted, while we have a center attraction tendency in country will be difficult to make polycentric capital. I'll compare Moscow and St. Petersburg, and I can tell that St. Petersburg is easier to keep polycentric. There's always will be a center, something polycentric like Pushkin, Pavlov, Sestris, Kronstadt, and so on, because St. Petersburg is uniform architectural planning style city, unlike Moscow. Moscow in its history consumed many cities, but no one remembers where they are. They have not become sub-centers. Come to Nizhny Novgorod, center Sormovo is the district. In Moscow, there are only 12 cities that consumed other cities. And these are cases known to everyone. And in Moscow consumed, and not many remember that till middle 80s, Sontsevo was independent city. So Moscow, by its nature, is absolutely different, even Russian cities. Again, St. Pete, it's easier to digest what it consumes. So creation of polycentricity in Moscow much more complicated rather than in St. Petersburg. Thank you. It's quite fair observation. So the last statement from the audience. I'd like to make commentary regarding discussion of the polycentricity and monocentricity. I'd like to draw attention to the second and third group to important facts. Moscow as the single whole urban entity, it's about 30-40 kilometers. The average accessibility to the city center, 90 to 100 minutes. Do you agree to commute every day so many minutes? That's the question to polycentricity. Now the answer, the research that was conducted by our colleagues, Novikov, and about the moving around to megapolis, they don't agree, 70%. No, 70%. It's arguable summary. Arguable resume, but we don't have any other instruments to see it. Alexander Nikolaevich, can I say 2 words of assessment? You have to understand that moving of active population, the working people, in this analysis, I didn't look in detail, but I heard something. It is clear that majority, I remember it's not 70, but 60. 130? I saw different proportion numbers. It is clear that retirees, children, they will not move that far. They are not bound to the center. And the overrunning of the center, that also takes place. That's the question of development of periphery. So this is also duty to move around. The mono center attracts. Yes. Sergei Olegovich. We accept your remark, but it seems to me, and I'm ready to agree with the colleagues that in all our arguments we have big share of uncertainty, lack of research. And this research of which we spoke and other researches, of course, it's only first approximation to the understanding how this very complex organism lives. We don't have well-built database. We don't have modern database, interactive database that could help us to study territorial distribution processes. So very very little done around planning for Moscow, very little done about consideration and research, and this is fundamental part for making justifiable decisions. It would be wonderful if we could send this message, this concern of the professional community to the government of Moscow, and we would expand and finance and the subjects participating in recognition of these processes so that we could discuss real empirical work. What is happening? We need to know the physical structure and social structure and economical processes, not just know, but I would even say we should know in the area of scientific knowledge. Something can be proven, fixed, presented. This is very important part of the future work. Now, 2 words about the results of this discussion. What I heard and what seems to me very positive, the position of Moscow government presented today by the managers of the top tier and other people that are related to Moscow government. These people are concerned, I'd say, vital power, the project, the development, the economical resource that they are trying to formulate, to develop, to protect, to bring in. So we're talking about the statement of Sergei Olegovich, Mikhail An, that what projects do we have, where they are, what do they want. This is really, strictly speaking, fundamental resource for development of megapolis and agglomeration, despite of anything. That is why my main commentary is development of the territories. Of any territories doesn't mean formation of new centers. This is most important. Let's now and forever agree. We have to develop territories, development of territories in terms of life quality, in terms of environment quality, economical development, so that bad jobs should be replaced by good jobs, and so on. And this process, the biological process, depends on, it concerns Moscow government, but development of polycentric structure is something else. And first of all, its presence of communities, large social communities that agree to identify themselves with the center of the city, or let's say not only with the city center, but with the other points. The people themselves and the processes that take place in their heads and their lives predispose them to move from center to other places. I had a wonderful talk with my good friend in Sao Paulo. I asked her, where do you live? She said, I said, do you live far from the center? You know, Moscow tradition to ask, where do you live? In terms of how far you live from the center. She said, I live near the center. I have a wonderful life. So we went to visit her. We traveled 20, 30, 40 minutes. We went and went. In about 1 hour, we came to the place. The place happened to be far away. And I asked her, you live in the center? It's quite far away from the historical center of Sao Paulo. She said, my friend, who counts the historical center, the city center? We have local center. She is a university professor. This is our center. This is where we live. This is where all community of more than 3 million are joining the historical core. This is how they live. This is how they understand. This is the social basis for polycentricity. It must be seen and comprehended. And the last commentary, if the government of Moscow, if Moscow Architectural Institute are concerned with the resource, the activity directed for territories development, detection of the projects, and refining of the projects for the purpose of development, I believe that right now there is another concern that must be taken care of by the professional communities, the regulation of the processes in order to attain maximum effect. Here we really have very few gaps, very many gaps. Regulation like legal regulation and economical regulation and stimulation of what do we need, and regulation of something that is forbidden, that seems to be not successful, not necessary. We have very few mechanisms. So it is worth to rush and refresh the rules of development of the land of Moscow was one of the most important instruments, and we have to engage economical mechanisms that stimulate this or that type of evolvement. But efficiency of regulation, in my view, will be achieved only when we will achieve consent in understanding where the centers of new agglomeration development should pop up. I pretend that the point of view that there's the final answer, what projects you offer will work out, which will be the centers, and people will say that this is our center, and we can share the view that we can rely on it as the center. I think this is the direction where we have to apply force, and we can agree between each other and with the managers and the professional community members. Thank you, everyone, for participation. It was very interesting.